I think a lot of people have this assumption that therapy is really only for when you are really messed up in some way and you need to have this really big problem that merits going to see a therapist for. But that's just not really the case. I think that therapy can be so helpful for really anyone going through any type of life experiences. And so in this video, I'm going to be sharing more about what I talk to my therapist about in the hopes of maybe helping you to come up with things that you can maybe bring up with your own therapist. I often share on here how important therapy is as part of my overall recovery journey and part of maintaining my well-being. And I think that probably a lot of people who hear me say that are probably like, oh yeah, well, she has schizophrenia, so of course she needs therapy. But I think it's important to understand that I talk to my therapist about so much more than just my living with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. And, it's a really universal thing in terms of its benefits for a person's overall well-being. My therapist often says to me that she wants to help me in whatever way is best for me. And so for me, how I approach this as, going into therapy is asking her for help in terms of figuring out how to live my life in the most full and meaningful and satisfying way possible for me. So really her role in terms of our therapeutic relationship is to kind of help guide me towards the life that I want to be living and guide me towards, interacting with my life and the people in it and whatnot in a way that feels best for me. So what do I actually talk with my therapist about? I think oddly enough, something that I want to start off by pointing out is that I live with schizoaffective disorder, but I very rarely talk with my therapist about my symptoms or about living or managing schizoaffective disorder. I kind of find it more helpful to talk with my psychiatrist about actually managing specific symptoms because they have a better idea of, how medications can help or how to manage specifically symptoms. And then I like to talk further about, how those symptoms are enmeshed in my overall life and other facets of my life with my therapist. It's kind of nice to take more of a holistic deep dive into how my symptoms affect my life and, my life in general with my therapist. Okay, so what do I talk to her about? So something that comes up probably the most frequently is relationships that I have in my life. So, I think the primary one that comes up is my relationship with my partner. I think that that's probably the biggest relationship in my life. And so it kind of makes sense that it takes up a lot of time and space in my mind and my thoughts and whatnot. And I want to exert a lot of energy in terms of, tending to that relationship as much as I can. And so my therapist is really helpful in terms of, sorting through and figuring out how to manage conflict with my partner, but also figuring out how to best support him and how to communicate to him how I need to be supported as well. And kind of navigating all of those kind of issues with someone who has more insight into, how I show up in relationships and in terms of figuring out how to best manage that relationship. And then, of course, I talk to her about other relationships in my life too. So that includes sometimes friendships or relationships with my family or sometimes professional relationships. And it's just kind of a really, really helpful resource to have to kind of talk through any issues that I'm having with relationships in my life. Now, before I get into more of what I talk to my therapist about, I just want to take a quick minute to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Sometimes when you're struggling, it can be really difficult if you don't have anyone to talk to. Being alone with your thoughts can be an isolating feeling that can allow negativity to consume you. This is why this video is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. There is a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's network of 20,000 plus therapists that gives you access to help that may not be available in your area. You just fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you get matched with a therapist in as little as 48 hours. Then you schedule secure video and phone sessions, plus you can exchange unlimited messages and everything you share is completely confidential. Therapy has been and is an essential part of my own recovery journey. It's so helpful to have someone who's a trained professional in my life that I can talk to and feel supported by when facing life's challenges. You can request a new therapist at no additional charge anytime. Join the 3 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/livingwell. That's better, HELP, also linked below in the description. Thanks so much, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this video. Okay, so now let's get back to what I talked to my therapist about. Another big relationship that comes up a lot in therapy is around my kids and how to effectively parent. I think that that's a really, really helpful thing that I talk with my therapist about is issues that I'm having a hard time navigating with my kids. Whether that is, navigating tricky behaviors that they're exhibiting or navigating emotional roller coasters that go with raising kids. It's just really helpful to have someone who can offer additional insight into how to handle these situations with kids. And to kind of go along with this parenting theme in therapy is also the theme of navigating my relationship with our co-parents. That can be kind of a tricky thing to navigate. And I'm really, really grateful that we have a great relationship with our co-parents, but it can be sometimes really helpful to just talk through any issues that we have, any issues that arise in the co-parenting dynamic with my therapist, and just kind of get more insight again into how to best handle situations that might be a little bit more delicate. I chat a lot with my therapist about my life goals and, where I want to be in life, things that I want to achieve. And we kind of work together to figure out how best to go about achieving those things and how they best fit into my life and fit into my family's life and that kind of thing. And figure out ways to, build overall life satisfaction in terms of achieving the goals that I have for myself and my life. So another big thing that I talk with her about is how to deal with maladaptive coping strategies that come up. And I think that this is probably something that literally everyone does. Everyone has some sort of maladaptive or kind of more on the negative side coping mechanism that they use. This can be really anything that doesn't serve you as best as it can in terms of using as a coping mechanism. So for some people, this might be reliance on coffee, something as simple as that. Or it can sometimes be, obsessions around eating. Or for me, it's been around, spending or on over exercise or anything that kind of creeps over the line of healthy and into the kind of unhealthy territory where it has some sort of negative impact on your life. And so this is something that I find really helpful to kind of keep an eye on in terms of making sure I don't slip over that line and, constantly talking about the coping mechanisms that I'm using with my therapist to make sure that they are serving me in a healthy way. I share in a bunch of our other videos, kind of strategies I've used to help navigate out of these maladaptive coping mechanisms or coping strategies. And my therapist has been a really integral part in helping me to navigate away from them. My therapist has also been really helpful in periods of more crisis or when I'm feeling like I need more support navigating whatever comes up. And so when I've been having difficulties with my mental health, she's been a really great source of support in terms of offering, connection and offering to connect me with other supports in the community, or she's even offered to connect with my psychiatrist to kind of form more of a bridge between my levels of care or the professionals who support me. It's also been helpful that she has kind of a general understanding of psychiatric medications, which I am on, because that kind of helps her to have a better understanding of, how medications might affect me and how that can affect my overall life and, my satisfaction and capacity and all that kind of stuff that goes along with how meds can affect you. It's also helpful that she can kind of ask questions and kind of guide my thinking in terms of things to bring up with my psychiatrist around medications if I'm having any problems with that. But I think kind of the most, valuable thing that my therapist does for me is that she's able to kind of point out my tendencies in terms of how I engage with my life and with the people in it. So if she sees that I'm slipping into some tendency that I have in terms of how I relate to people, close relationships in my life or whatnot, it's really helpful that she's able to kind of draw my attention to that, point out what's happening and be like, maybe we can try this instead. Or, just kind of alerting me to the fact that I'm slipping into those tendencies. And I think that the only way that you can really get that out of therapy is by really investing in the therapeutic relationship. The only reason that she knows that I have those tendencies is because I've made a deliberate effort to be really open and honest in therapy and to really, be vulnerable with her in terms of how I approach things in my life, how I approach relationships in my life, and that kind of thing. And so it's taken a lot of time and effort to get to a place where she's able to have that intimate insight and knowledge into my life. But now that we're there and now that we've both put that effort in, it's incredibly valuable. So that's kind of a good segue into some tips that I wanted to provide about, how to engage with your therapist. And so that kind of number one tip is around the therapeutic relationship. It's really, really important to be open and honest with your therapist and to kind of lean into vulnerability. The more vulnerable you are and the more open and honest you are with the therapist, the better your therapist is going to be able to support you and kind of help guide you with the goals that you have for yourself in your life. And I know that this can be incredibly intimidating to kind of wrap your head around, where you are going to sit in front of an at first stranger who, has all the information at their disposal that you're giving them to kind of judge you and judge how you're engaging with your life. But I think it's really important to remember that that is not what therapy is about. They are not there to judge you. They are there to empathize with the information and the experiences that you're sharing and to help you, reach the place that you want to reach in life. And that's really what they're there to facilitate. They're not there to judge you at all. Now, that said, if you're just not feeling a connection with your therapist, that is totally valid too, and that's okay. What you want to do in that situation, if you're not feeling a good relationship or a good connection with your therapist, is to seek out a new one. They will completely understand if you explain to them, I just don't think this fit is completely there. Can you recommend someone else? Or you can go off and find someone else on your own. It's totally okay to kind of try out numerous therapists before you find one that feels like a really good fit for you. And another tip that I have is around something that I experience quite frequently when I'm seeing medical professionals, and this includes when I'm seeing my therapist, is this sort of amnesia that I get as soon as I enter my therapist's office. It's kind of like everything that I wanted to talk to her about just kind of slips out of my head as soon as I enter. And so in order to combat this, I've kind of started to develop lists throughout the weeks before I see her or the week before I see her or whatnot about things that come up in my life that I would like to speak with her about or that I would like to talk through with her. And so I can kind of whip out my phone or wherever I wrote the list and kind of work through that with her. Or at the very beginning of the session, when she asks kind of where we want to go with the session, I can reference that list and say, these are the things that I would like to bring up. And then we can kind of prioritize things on that list in terms of how we want to build the session. Something else that she encourages me to do is to write about difficult or emotional experiences immediately after they happen so that we can kind of have more to go on in terms of unpacking those experiences in therapy. I think another tip that I have is around how often you see your therapist. So I have gone through periods of my life where I have needed to see a therapist every couple days, and that's okay. If that's where you're at and that's what you need, that's okay to ask that of your therapist. And hopefully they're able to provide that, or you can find a therapist who is able to accommodate that. And then I've also gone through periods of my life where I didn't need to see my therapist for stretches of, 2 months. And that's okay too. It's kind of important to be able to be in constant communication with your therapist about what it is you need from them in that moment of your life. And so it's okay to see your therapist as frequently as you need to or as infrequently as you need to too. They're kind of just there to be kind of a touching point in terms of managing your stability in life and managing, again, your satisfaction and overall contentedness with your life. So I would love to hear if you have any other tips for how to navigate the therapeutic relationship and how to get the most possible out of therapy. If you want to share them in the comments below, we would love to hear from you. So before I leave you today, I just want to kind of reiterate the point that therapy is for everyone. There is always so much benefit that really anyone can get out of therapy in terms of talking about, how to reach a place in your life that feels the best for you, life satisfaction, reaching your goals, navigating relationships in your life in a way that feels good. There's just so much, material in everyone's life and ways that therapy can really help everyone. It doesn't have to be reserved for people who are in really difficult places in their life or navigating really specific difficult challenges, or people with, chronic mental illnesses. It's really for everyone, and everyone can benefit from therapy. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more from us, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Also, just a quick reminder that we also have an online peer support community available to our patrons. You can become a patron by signing up at the link in the description below. Our online peer support community is kind of a really wonderful complementary addition to therapy, where you can gain additional insights and support around navigating your mental illness. We offer peer support through various mediums, including weekly peer support groups. So if that is something that interests you, make sure to check out our Patreon page at the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.